Rocky heel. Today, I'm going to be going over a very important topic. That is the topic of motivation in training. There's a common trend that I see with all of my clients and many of the dog owners that I talk to on a daily basis. That is that a lot of dog owners and clients want to focus on the obedience commands themselves. Things such as sit, down, heel, etc. And this is all good that they want to focus on these things. I'm not saying that focusing on the obedience is bad. The problem is that all the focus that the training goes into is on the obedience itself. But very little focus and attention goes to the motivation, the why behind the obedience. You see, the motivation is what is going to determine how strong the dog's desire is to hold a down position or to hold a sit position. A lot of people focus on the mechanics of teaching the dog how to sit or how to lay down and get the repetitions in. This is awesome and this is great, but at the end of the day, if the dog isn't motivated to want to do that obedience, it's really not going to be something that's going to last, especially at times when you need it. With all of my clients, rather than focusing on the obedience first, one of the things I stress a lot is focusing on the dog's motivation. The motivation is literally the glue that holds everything together in your training. And if you have a dog that knows the obedience, but isn't motivated to comply with it, it's not going to do you any good. Now, there are many forms of motivation, and honestly, that's a video for another topic. But the most common form of motivation that we use in training is either going to be play-based motivation or utilizing food rewards to motivate our dog. When I talk about motivation, I like to use the example of charging your phone. Every time you motivate your dog in training, it is like putting your phone on a charger. You're building up that charge so that you can use it later. Every time you get your dog to do an obedience command, such as sit, down, etc., you're using your phone. You're draining a little bit of that battery. Oftentimes, owners are constantly in a state of draining that battery, using that obedience, but they never spend the time to recharge that battery in their dog. By starting a training session, by having the dog chase food lures, or play a game of tug or fetch with you, that's a great way that we can begin to build the motivation in the beginning of the training session. Once we build adequate motivation in the beginning of the training session, we can then incorporate obedience commands. But then after every repetition of obedience, we should always go back to rebuilding the dog's motivation for that next repetition that we're trying to teach them. Motivation is also crucial when we take our dogs to new environments. If you go to a new distracting environment, obviously your dog is going to have a change in motivation. Maybe the treat that you're holding is not as motivating to them as the dog that they want to go interact with that's in the public park. When we go to a new location and we see that our dog is struggling with obedience commands that they normally are able to accomplish with ease, rather than hammering the dog with obedience repetition after obedience repetition, the first thing we should do is ditch the obedience and focus on motivating the dog in that environment. Oftentimes, this looks like simply playing with your dog while there are other distractions in the environment. If your dog is capable of playing with you and focusing all of their attention and motivation on you while there's a distraction in the environment, then they are ready to do the obedience commands. But if you can't even get your dog to engage with you over a toy or a piece of food, then expecting them to do an obedience command in that situation is not only unfair to your dog, but it's unreasonable and is just not going to be effective. Something I always tell to a lot of my clients is that teaching a dog how to sit or how to down or how to follow any obedience command is easy. The challenging part of training is teaching the dog to be motivated to want to do that obedience in a variety of locations when there's competing motivators in the environment. So rather than focusing on the obedience commands themselves, you should be focusing on your dog's overall attitude. If your dog comes to a new location and is constantly distracted, sniffing, pulling, going towards every location but you have a lack of motivation problem. And trying to overlay obedience on top of that is just going to be ineffective and is not going to work. Rather than trying to overlay obedience, go to that new location where there's distractions and try to build motivation with your dog. If you can get that motivation and capture it, then you can get the obedience that you truly want with your dog. That is why, with all my clients, I stress the motivation levels of the dog. If the dog is not motivated, we stop the training, we stop the obedience repetitions, and we go back to trying to motivate the dog. Building up the dog's motivation should be the first and primary goal before starting any training session with any dog. If you can master the motivation, you can master the obedience.